Learn me, I'll learn you. Diversity, teach me, I teach you like university. Freedom be, freedom be. Learn me, I'll learn you. Diversity, teach me, I'll teach you. Freedom be, diversity.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our learning series. I'm Dr. CI of Diversity, and we're going to be dropping some knowledge on you today. So usually when y'all tune into these videos, I'm here by myself often, but there are subject matters that I'm not always the expert on. And for that, I lean on my colleagues to come in and have conversations to educate y'all. So today, I've invited ChrisTiana ObeySumner to talk to you about race and disability. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into it.
Hey y'all, my name is ChrisTiana ObeySumner. I am a social equity consultant, educator, and activist. I partner with City LLC a lot. I also have my own consulting firm, Epiphanies of Equity, and a nonprofit, Eleanor Elizabeth Institute for Black Empowerment.
Our first question I would love for you to answer for our audience is to talk about race and disability and justice, and why those things are so important as intersections.
The reason why the intersection of race and disability is important is because you may or may not know this, but Black, Indigenous people of color are also disabled. Who knew?
Who knew?
So it's important to know this because when we don't know something, we can't address something. And intersectional erasure is one of those things that happens when we don't know something and we don't address it. And what that is that when someone sees someone else as complex, sometimes a part of their identity gets left by the wayside or edited out in the way that we see that person and interact with that person. So for me, they might see me and say, oh, like here's this Black woman person who does social justice work who says they're disabled, but I don't know, I don't see it. Or that's too much for me to hold. It'll say stuff like, I don't see you as disabled, which is a whole problem.
You better not say that shit.
And it's for this sort of intersectional erasure that I got into social justice work in the first place. Like, professionally, but also personally, being born autistic, but also being born to an African traditional spirituality. That spirituality was something that was normalized for me and my family until I got into my senior year of high school. And I started to say, me speaking to my ancestors, having these sort of visions, having these sort of disembodied experiences was schizoaffective disorder, dissociative identity disorder. And as a result, I spent nearly 7 years going between inpatient hospital floors, being put into psychiatric asylums, being put on chemical lobotomy, and being put in socialization programs to condition me to act the way that people think I should act in society. So when people see me and they say things like, oh, you don't seem autistic, look at how well you can interact, what they don't know is they're saying, that socialization program did a good job. I don't see anything. And that can be harmful for a lot of people, right? I'm someone who, they put me on disability at 19 because they told me I would never go to school or work. And here I am. To understand these sort of things are important for equity and inclusion because when we don't know, we don't do.
Right.
Neurodiversity is something that just exists for everyone. We all have a diversity of thought. We all have a diverse way of interacting with the world, understanding the world. Neurodivergence is a term that came from that was based in autism inclusion movement. And now it doesn't have to mean autism. It means anyone who has, whether it is acquired or whether it is something you're born with, something that makes their way of thinking, interacting, behaving in the world different than what we as society had come up with as the norm.
So Todd, you mentioned neurotypical. What is that?
Neurotypical are those who do find that they don't have as many barriers thinking and behaving and acting in the world of how we have a society seen as the norm.
Speaking of that, let's have an awareness moment. So there are some of y'all who sit on y'all asses or sit in front of the camera and talk about diversity of thought, and you use that as a way to erase intersections. I wanted to be clear that when we have conversations about diversity of thought and we're thinking about neurodivergent or neurotypical, you should not be having conversations about diversity of thought without thinking about people with disabilities. There's no way that conversation should be had without that inclusive language being involved. So for all of y'all out here talking about, well, we don't want to hire based on race, we want diversity of thought. Diversity of thought applies to every other identity that we have.
And when you say diversity of thought as it actually exists and not the way you think it exists.
Yeah, and you talked about some models, right, in order to help break down how we understand disability. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about the difference between the social model and the medical model.
Right. The medical model is when you have a person who has been identified as disabled, and you say this person is going to need these accommodations in order for them to come into our space the way that it currently is. Mm-hmm. So you might say, have a person like me who's autistic, who overhead fluorescent lighting can affect the way that I operate. It can give me migraines, it can overload my sensory processes, and you might say, oh, well, now we're gonna have to turn off the overhead fluorescent lighting.
You're damn right.
And give them this ambient lighting. And people, I think what's really frustrating about it is the othering of that. It's othering that person to, well, that's a disabled person and that's their accommodations. Mm-hmm. A social model would say, what is in our environment that's disabling? And a lot of this is understanding and having that humble and deep dive understanding of what it means to have an employee or a colleague or a student or a friend with disabilities. So in the case of social model disability, I would go to an organization and the first thing that they would ask is there any way that your office needs to be set up that will help you to thrive in your job more? I would say that's the first step.
Right.
But I would say a pro tip step would be to do an audit of your environment and to say, based on what we know from the different sorts of the complexity of disability, what is in our environment that's disabling? These are all things that what it really takes is for someone to sit and take the time to really think about how they can be inclusive.
So it sounds like human beings need to really be cognitive of their actions, mm-hmm. right? And we talk about the position often of an ally versus an accomplice, mm-hmm. and what that means when you are in those two spaces and you are looking to take some sort of action. Talk to our audience about the difference between an accomplice and an ally.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people get frustrated with me because I'll call them an ally, not an accomplice, and they'll say, but I read all these books and I go to all these trainings and I watched Hamilton in 13 and I've done all these things, and they have this great philosophy and framework. They could probably teach courses on it, but but they don't have any tangible action that is leading to the outcomes of those social justice principles that they're holding, that they're talking about. So an ally is someone who has perhaps is developing or even has established mm-hmm. a framework of social justice. And they can tell you what all the different terms mean, and they can quote W.E.B. Du Bois, and they can do all those different sorts of things. But when it comes down to, okay, great, what have you done to lead to parity in wages? What have you done to further accessibility in your organization based on a social model? What have you done to de-bias folks around you around, say, racial stigmas?
Right.
And then that's when you start to see things get a little bit hairy. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know how, I don't have the time, or perhaps I need more training, and they stay in that allyship space. Mm-hmm. The accomplice is the person who's doing the thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that I can put it. Do the thing. And this is a framework that there's a lot of different sort of concepts of this and explanations, but this is the explanation I'm using. Yeah. One is like learn, to be an ally, learn the thing. To be an accomplice, do the thing.
Right. It's like, if you watch an NBA game, if you study the NBA, if you into athletics, that don't make you a Shaq. That don't make you an NBA player, right? You have to be in the NBA playing to be the player to meet that identity. Just to give y'all a basic idea of what they are talking about when they talk about the difference between an accomplice versus an ally. One is knowledge, one is action. Right? And that, to some extent, taking knowledge and seeking knowledge is action. But there's a difference when there's action that is active. All right, y'all got that? Y'all got those tools? So we've broken it down for y'all today. We want to thank ChrisTiana for coming through and dropping knowledge on us. And also, we love to hear about your experiences when it comes to disability, especially with the intersections of race and disability. What has those experiences been like for you? Make sure that you share that with us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And y'all have a great day because we're going to be dropping more knowledge on y'all along the way.
Learn me, I'll learn you. Diversity, teach me, I teach you like university. Freedom be, freedom be.